Welcome back to our GECO channel for our series, The Young Hunter's Guide. In today's episode, we're covering the topic of roe deer hunting.
When and why do we hunt roe deer in general? Hunting seasons vary from state to state and generally start around May. So why do we hunt roe deer? Roe deer are the most widespread species of hoofed game in Central Europe. And it's just important to create a balance between forest and game, so there isn't too much browsing and the young future forest can grow. Roe deer hunting is particularly good in May, when the vegetation is still a bit low, so you can do good interval hunting in those months before the summer lull starts in mid-June.
Which roe deer do we hunt? Well, to ensure a balanced sex ratio, you should hunt both in the juvenile class and among the older ones. And a lot in the juvenile class, that would be the ideal case, but in practice, of course, it can't always be implemented. Otherwise, of course, take out weak or sick animals. And Christian, when you're out hunting, for example, how do you handle the identification? So what do you look for there?
Buck and doe is, of course, relatively obvious. With bucks in general, there are various things you can look out for. That's, of course, the body itself, how it looks. I mean, here we have a very young buck, of course. The antler mass and also the mass of the body. Then for one thing here, a prominent brisket is always a good sign. So if it's very pronounced, that tends to speak for its age. For example, people always talk about the grumpy look in roe deer, which also develops in old bucks. But you can generally say that it's never 100% certain. You just have to weigh up all the things you've seen and then arrive at a tendency, but you can never say with 100% certainty exactly what kind of animal it is. And with yearlings and does, it's perhaps good that at the start of the season you can distinguish yearlings well because they change coat before the does. It's the same with bucks. The yearlings usually change coat before the older ones, but the old bucks shed their velvet before the young ones, which also helps a lot with identification in May or the early hunting season.
Yes, what's also important in roe deer hunting is the right ammunition and making sure the shot hits the mark. How would you do it now if you have the buck standing in front of you like that? Where would you aim for the optimal point?
We'll put it here for now, but a really helpful rule to remember is to go up from the back of the front leg and align it with the rump patch that you can see at the back. And where these two lines intersect is ultimately right behind the shoulder.
Yes, and in general, we all know Section 19 of the Federal Hunting Act, which dictates what you can and cannot do. For roe deer, it is especially important over 1,000 joules at 100 meters. And that you are not allowed to use artificial light sources at night, for example, and so on.
Exactly, yes. And in terms of ammunition, it is, of course, increasingly required by law to also shoot lead-free. That is why I have now switched to completely lead-free ammunition, and that is the GECO 0. It is a jacketed bullet, a partial fragmentation type, which also has, yes, low meat damage and a flat trajectory. So I get along very well with that one. But there are also, of course, many others bullets for cloven hoofed game. They must be over 6.5 millimeters. And now there is also the Creedmoor, the 6.5 Creedmoor from GECO Star, which is a deformation bullet, but also lead-free.
Yes, we are here today for the evening hunt, and currently yearlings and bucks are in season. But I would really like to try for that one particular buck tonight, the one that we have seen here quite often lately, you know? So I am going to go ahead and start loading my magazine now, just to be ready. I want to make sure I am fully prepared, just in case we get a good chance at him tonight. But nothing in sight at the moment. So I can always best remember the optimal shot placement by going up the back of the front leg, and then drawing a line, for example, to the rump, and then placing the shot right behind the shoulder. Yes, and it is also important now if the buck comes, I take a shot and he runs off after the hit, just stay calm. That is really the most important thing, and that you then remember the point of impact, because it is just important if you have to track it later to then look for the signs of the hit there. You can remember it by a tree, the edge of a meadow, or a bush. And it would be best, of course, if you have binoculars with a rangefinder, then you can better estimate later how many meters away it actually was. Yes, and now I hope that we'll have a good sighting today and that he might show up.
Good morning, everyone. We are here on this very peaceful time at a breathtakingly beautiful meadow bottom. We're hunting for roe deer, bucks especially, since they're the only ones currently in season. I'm currently out here right now hunting them with lead-free zero ammunition. It's a partial fragmentation bullet with a jacket and a double tin core. And, well, the morning might not be for everyone getting up so early, but it's actually quite nice to watch nature waking up, I'd say. And it's also an advantage, of course, that you can identify the game in the best light. And also, if the game doesn't drop on the shot, you have impact signs that you can see much better. So why do we actually hunt roe deer? Roe deer are the most widespread species of hoofed game in Europe or Central Europe. And accordingly, they also cause damage to small trees by browsing on them. And so there's a cull plan from the regional hunting authority that must be followed for each respective hunting ground. And that's how a balance can be established between the forest and the game as well. So now let's go into the equipment a bit that I have with me, besides my rifle, of course. So I always have a stalking stick with me in case something is already in the meadow when I arrive. Then, of course, binoculars, ideally with a rangefinder. But if that's too expensive for some, since these devices cost a lot, there are various apps where you can measure distances very well with GPS. And well, in the backpack in general, I have a headlamp with me, or a 4-headlamp, which just helps me a lot at twilight and in the early morning when you're out during such dark times. And in the backpack itself, hearing protection, obviously, so that our ears stay healthy for a long time. Ammunition, of course, the zero that we already discussed. Shooting rest so that you can shoot a bit more stably from high seats that aren't so good. I personally always like to take a spotting scope with me. That's, of course, not so well suited for stalking now. But yeah, I just like to be able to identify the roe deer and especially the bucks very precisely. And that helps me out very well with that. I also have a little quirk there, an adapter. So I take pictures of the bucks and the roe deer so that I can simply observe them over several years, whether they're territorial and how they behave. Yeah, in addition to everything else, I also have a knife with me, which is always really helpful in a variety of situations. You never know when you might need it, so it's good to have one on hand. And last but definitely not least, here's a little tip for you. If you happen to have some paper tissues with you, then you can very clearly and easily mark the exact point of impact, making it much more visible and obvious to anyone who needs to find it later. And also, if you find several signs of a hit, you can mark them clearly like a path so that you can find it again and again. And that was actually my entire equipment that I have with me. I personally don't need more either. You can tell me if you have other things in your backpack. But yeah, that's my equipment for now. So I've gone on a stalk again and just wanted to tell you a few points that I pay attention to. Especially important that you choose the stalking paths beforehand and also clean them so that you don't stalk into bedding areas and leave the hunting ground in certain places as quiet zones. Above all, it's important that you pay attention to the wind and the wind direction. There are these little powder bottles, for example, that you use there. Maybe one or the other knows that. It's important to wear quiet clothing and also to be odorless. So maybe don't put on the latest perfume before you go stalking. And since you're not in an elevated position, the shooting angle is relatively parallel. That means definitely pay attention to the classic rules from hunting school: foreground, background clear, and that you definitely have a backstop. Because you sometimes can't estimate it so well in the forest, have a rangefinder with me to be able to identify the animals properly and also to be able to measure the distance. Those are actually all the important points that I pay attention to on the stalk.
Thank you for tuning in again. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and could take some know-how. And if you have questions, you can of course write to us as always.
Bye.
Bye.